That night, standing on a rooftop in downtown Miami, surrounded by what looked like the perfect celebration, I finally understood. My own parents tried to poison me. And the truth? They were about to regret ever thinking I was the weak one. It's hard to believe it all started there, with a single, shimmering glass. Everyone thought I was just some ungrateful kid, the family black sheep who couldn't appreciate a good thing. But they didn't know what I knew. And they certainly didn't know about my brother Lucas, or the choice I was about to make that would shatter their carefully constructed empire. To understand any of this, you need to understand my family. We're not just toxic, we're a hazmat situation. My father, Robert Sterling, is the CEO of Sterling Biopharma, a name you've probably seen on business magazines. He talks about innovation and corporate responsibility, but behind closed doors? He's cold, calculating, and sees everyone as an asset. My mother, Catherine, comes from old money. Her family has been in medicine for generations. For her, reputation and status trump absolutely everything. Every public appearance, every smile, is curated for effect. Then there's Lucas, my younger brother, 20 years old. He's the golden child, groomed to take over the company. Junior at Harvard, Dean's List, fast-tracked for management. Our mother proudly introduced him as the rightful heir to the Sterling legacy. Me? I was just Ethan, the older son who dared to study environmental science instead of business. The disappointment. The one who would never amount to anything in their eyes. The favoritism started early. I remember being in middle school, bursting through the door with a silver medal from a cross-country race, buzzing with excitement. I expected hugs, congratulations. Instead, I found my parents throwing a mini celebration because Lucas had been selected to perform piano at some community event. Dad barely glanced at my medal. That's nice, but running won't help your career, son. Mom didn't even look up. That's when I learned the rules. Recognition wasn't for me. It was reserved for Lucas. Always. High school only solidified it. Lucas was the star, debate captain, tennis champ, straight-A student. Every achievement was celebrated with parties and photos. The walls of our house were covered in his trophies. I got straight A's too, won science awards, got accepted to every college I applied to. But my achievements? They went into a drawer. Out of sight, out of mind. The one time my mother showed up to an event of mine, when I won first place at the state science fair for my research on antibiotic contamination in local water sources, she leaned in and whispered, "You look so sloppy, like you don't belong here." It killed whatever joy I had. My parents never asked what I wanted to do. They'd already decided Ethan would study pharmaceuticals. Ethan would join the company. Ethan would support his brother. Every other dream was nonsense. When I told them I loved environmental science, my father waved his hand. That's for people who write useless reports. You need to do real work for the family. When I got into the University of Florida at Gainesville for environmental studies, he threatened to cut off all financial support. It was only thanks to scholarships and loans that I managed to hold my ground. For years, I thought I was born just to be Lucas's backdrop. He stood in the bright lights, and I waited in the shadows for a glance of recognition that never came. They called me stubborn, ungrateful. Lucas just had to smile, and everything was his. I genuinely believed I was nothing more than an unnecessary piece in the Sterling family puzzle. My grandmother, Beatrice, was the only light in those dark years. Ironically, she was my father's mother. A brilliant chemist in her day, her research laid the foundation for Sterling Biopharma. But in every company history book, every glossy brochure, her name was nowhere to be found. Erased. When I was 15, she showed me her old research notes, formulas that led to the company's first pain relief drug. They took my work, she said with a sad smile. Then they erased my name because I was a woman. Back then, they didn't believe women could stand equal to men in the lab. I asked if she regretted it. Her eyes lit up with a fierce spark. Never. Science is about serving people. But I do regret letting others decide my worth. Beatrice was nothing like my parents. If my father saw everything through profit, she saw people, future generations. Never let anyone say your passion is meaningless, she told me. If you love the environment, follow it. If you want to fight, then fight. Don't become anyone's shadow. Not even the shadow of this family. Those words became my compass. What my parents didn't know until it was too late was that Beatrice had prepared a secret gift. She'd quietly established an $8 million trust fund in my name, to be released when I graduated or turned 25. It was the key to my escape. I learned about it at 16, just before she passed. Holding my hand, her eyes clouded but glowing, she said, "I won't let you spend your life trapped in this cycle of injustice. Promise me you'll follow the path you choose." I nodded, not fully understanding then. My parents knew nothing about the trust until 3 months before graduation. Their attorney, Arthur, accidentally mentioned it during a company meeting. I watched my father's face drain of color, my mother's eyes harden. Everything changed. Their contempt morphed into quiet hostility. They understood, with that inheritance, I'd be independent. I wouldn't need them. I could even stand against them. I had become a real threat. But it wasn't just the money. I was about to discover their illegal activities. During my final semester, I joined a field research project on the St. Johns River. It ran through industrial zones, a known contamination risk. I chose it not just for science, but because I had an unshakable feeling something was waiting to be uncovered. At first, it was routine. But soon, alarming irregularities appeared. Mercury and lead levels were far higher than EPA standards. And then, traces of pharmaceutical compounds. Synthetic molecules I recognized. Substances that only show up in untreated wastewater from drug manufacturing plants. When I reported my findings, my professor nodded. They'd suspected for a long time, but lacked proof. Could it be my own father's company? I started comparing samples. The current led me closer to an industrial complex. A sign made my heart stop: Everglades Facility, Sterling Biopharma. Everything pointed back to my family. I searched the facility's public reports. The numbers were perfect, too perfect. I knew no process ran that smoothly. Something was hidden. I secretly took photos, stored data, recorded everything. The evidence mounted. Samples outside the plant's gates showed dangerously high concentrations of an experimental compound, one I'd read about in internal company documents. It could only have come from Sterling Biopharma. My stomach twisted. On one hand, I was a scientist driven by truth. On the other, this was my family. If I went public, it would be like turning a weapon on my own bloodline. But then I remembered Beatrice's words, "Never let anyone decide your worth." I decided to confront them. One evening, at dinner, I spread the printed test results across the table. "I know what the company is doing at the Everglades facility," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "I have data. I have evidence. If you don't stop the illegal dumping, I will report it." Dead silence. My father's eyes, sharp as blades. My mother's lips, pressed tight. Only Lucas looked shaken, wide-eyed. Finally, my father spoke, low and cold. "You don't understand, Ethan. There are things bigger than you realize. This family survives because of silence." For the first time, I didn't bow my head. Silence isn't family. Silence is complicity. From that moment, I knew there was no return. I began collecting everything: duplicate datasets, photos of samples, meticulous logs. I stored them on an encrypted drive. With Beatrice's inheritance, I had become the thorn they couldn't pull out. A few days before graduation, their tone changed completely. My mother started calling, not about grades, but about flowers for my dinner, dishes I liked. My father even sent a text, "Congratulations in advance. You've done something good." A chill ran down my spine. My father had never praised me. This change only made me suspicious. "You deserve a celebration worthy of you," my mother said, her tone so sugary it felt fake. I forced a polite smile, knowing nothing they did came without strings. I buried myself in finishing my research, preparing my defense. One copy of the data at the university, another on my personal drive, a third with my supervising professor, just in case. One evening, I overheard a heated argument outside my father's study. My mother's voice, full of worry, "Robert, are you sure this is necessary? What if someone finds out?" My father's low, sharp tone, "Don't you get it? He already has enough evidence. Add the inheritance, and he'll never depend on us. He could bring the whole company down." My mother's voice trembled, "But he's our son." My father cut her off. "He's a threat. The FDA has already started a quiet investigation. If Ethan speaks, we lose everything." I held my breath, heart pounding. Then my father's voice dropped lower, but I still heard. "The plan is just to make him sick for a few days. Get him hospitalized. We'll take care of the paperwork, cover the records. If the worst happens, if he dies before the trust is released, the money reverts back to us. That's the law." I stood frozen. My own parents were plotting to poison me. And it wasn't just about the $8 million. It was about silencing the truth about the Everglades facility. In that instant, I wanted to storm in and scream. But another voice whispered, "Asterisk, if they know you've heard, they'll find another way." Something worse, asterisk. I stepped back, forced myself to pretend I hadn't heard a thing. That evening, Lucas sat beside me, chatting cheerfully about his summer internship. "After graduation, are you applying to an international environmental organization?" he asked. I looked at his face, radiant and confident, completely unaware of our parents' scheme. He wasn't part of this plotting. To him, I was still just his distant older brother. Watching him laugh, my chest tightened. Part of me resented him, but another part wanted to protect him. I knew everything would explode in a few days. I had to be ready. The night of my graduation party finally arrived. Stepping out of the glass elevator onto the Ritz-Carlton rooftop, I was overwhelmed by the extravagance. Golden ribbons of light, banquet tables with imported flowers, soft jazz. To outsiders, it was a dazzling display from a powerful family honoring their son. To me, every flickering candle felt like a flame waiting to consume me. Most guests were familiar faces from the Florida business world, my father's partners, attorneys, even reporters. Among them, only a handful belonged to me, my friends, Sam and Chloe, looking slightly out of place. They hugged me, and I forced a smile, grateful not to be completely alone. I could feel my parents' eyes on me, unwavering. Their smiles were in place, but the stiffness of their lips and the calculating glint in their eyes told a different story. I saw my father whisper to Arthur, the company attorney. Arthur nodded, then glanced at me with the sharp, appraising look of someone assessing an item at auction. A shiver ran through me. If he was here, it wasn't just to celebrate. Lucas appeared, smiling, and tapped my shoulder. "Everyone keeps asking about your plans after graduation," he laughed. "Mom and Dad keep bringing it up." I looked at him, seeing the innocence mixed with a faint unease. He still didn't understand. "They just want to make sure I'll do the right thing for the family," I forced out. Lucas frowned. "But isn't this your moment? Why aren't they asking if you're happy?" That simple question pierced me. I turned away, sipping my water. When I looked back, my mother's stare was fixed on me, her smile stiff as wax. I drew a deep breath. Every sense was on high alert. I was in a predator's arena, and I was the prey. My mind flashed to the hidden notebook. As long as I was alive, that truth could come to light. Maybe that's why they needed to eliminate me tonight. But I wouldn't tremble. I had overheard their scheme. I was ready. I wouldn't let them win. The party moved into its formal stage. My parents hadn't taken their eyes off me. My father picked up a bottle of sparkling cider. The servers poured for guests, but when they reached our table, he insisted on doing it himself. A nice personal touch, he announced with a smooth smile, for my graduate son. He filled my glass and set it in front of me. I watched my mother lean forward, pretending to adjust a napkin, but I caught it, the quick movement of her hand over my glass, the faint shimmer of powder dissolving into the golden liquid. My heartbeat thundered. Asterisk just enough to make him sick. Hospitalized for a few days. Time to shift the assets, asterisk my throat went dry, but I kept my smile. Calm. Unshaken. I glanced around. My mother pretended to chat, but her eyes never left me. My father raised his glass, waiting. In that tense instant, I leaned and tapped Sam's hand under the table. He looked up, meeting my eyes, a silent plea. And resolve. I whispered, record this. Record everything. Sam gave the faintest nod, discreetly sliding his phone from his pocket, camera rolling. To Ethan, my father declared, his voice booming. Guests cheered. I lifted my glass. Lucas, beside me, smiled brightly, not a trace of suspicion. He had never seen their dark side. My dear brother, I said, my voice soft, warm. Today isn't just my day. You've always encouraged me. I want to share this moment with you. I smiled and handed him my glass. Guests clapped, thinking it a sweet gesture. Oh, Ethan, you're amazing. Lucas exclaimed, taking the glass without a shred of doubt. I quickly lifted his glass, the clear, safe one, and brought it to my lips. In that instant, my parents went pale. Color drained from their faces. My mother stammered, half reaching out to stop him. But it was too late. In front of dozens of guests and recording phones, they couldn't do a thing. Lucas tilted his head back and drank it in one long sip. Delicious, he said with a carefree laugh, utterly unaware. The music swelled again. Guests returned to conversations. But out of the corner of my eye, my parents stood frozen, forced smiles trembling. Arthur bent low, whispering to them, his face panicked. I set my glass down gently, gripping Sam's hand under the table. The camera was still rolling. I lowered my head and whispered, the evidence is sealed now. They'll have to play by my rules. 10 minutes passed. Lucas laughed, shook hands, boasted about being entrusted with bigger responsibilities. Every time my parents' eyes flickered toward him, I saw the tension behind their smiles. They were afraid. Then, the change began. Lucas, always flawlessly composed, suddenly placed a hand over his chest. His face drained. Are you okay? A friend asked. Just a little dizzy, Lucas murmured, forcing a fragile smile. But within a minute, cold sweat poured down his skin. His face turned ghostly pale. I held my breath. My heart clenched. No matter how bitter I felt, seeing Lucas suffer still stung. But then the memories rushed back, the times he took credit, the times my parents cast me aside, and tonight, the fact that this poison was meant for me. My heart is racing too fast, Lucas gasped before collapsing onto the floor. Screams erupted. Guests stumbled back. Call 911, someone yelled. I rushed forward, kneeling beside Lucas. Amid the chaos, I was calmer than anyone. I leaned close to Sam. Send the video now. Back it up to the cloud. Don't let it get lost. Sam nodded rapidly, his hands trembling but firm as he secured the evidence. The wail of ambulance sirens cut through the Miami night faster than I expected. Paramedics rushed onto the rooftop. "He's struggling to breathe." "Heart arrhythmia," a medic shouted. "We need to get him to the hospital immediately." I stepped forward, my voice clear and firm. "Wait, I have critical information. Tell the doctors this is very likely a toxin related to an experimental compound from Sterling Biopharma. Project code R17. The substance is called cyclopentylamine derivative 47. The paramedics froze. "Are you sure?" one asked. I nodded sharply. "I interned in the company's lab. I know the signs." Without hesitation, the medic scribbled notes and relayed the message. I glanced at my parents. They stood frozen, ashen. My mother stammered, "Ethan, what are you saying? Don't slander your own parents." I turned, my voice sharp as steel. "Slander? Everyone here saw it. Father chose that bottle. And soon the doctors will confirm everything. If there's truly nothing to hide, then what are you so afraid of?" The air went silent. Guests looked at my parents with suspicion. Arthur stood stiff, sweat beading on his forehead. The ambulance sped away. Sam caught my arm. "Are you sure you want to go? The police will be here any minute." "That's exactly why I have to go," I replied. "If I'm not there, they'll twist the story. I have to be the one to speak the truth first." At the emergency room, chaos reigned. Doctors and nurses swarmed Lucas. The screen showed erratic spikes. His heart was in complete disarray. One doctor frowned at the test results. "Signs of chemical poisoning, likely an industrial compound." I stepped in. "It could be R17, an experimental compound suspended because it caused arrhythmia and respiratory failure. Sterling Biopharma studied it 2 years ago." The doctor snapped up. "How do you know this?" "I've been secretly investigating their lab for months." That's why the moment Lucas started sweating cold and his heartbeat went erratic, I recognized the symptoms. This isn't random. It's the classic reaction. The doctor nodded sharply and ordered the experimental antidote protocol. Just then, police arrived. 2 officers requested statements. "There is suspicion the victim was poisoned. We need information." My father pushed forward. "This is a private family matter. My son only had a drop in blood pressure. No need for police interference." But the officer cut him off. "Doctors have confirmed signs of chemical poisoning. This is now a criminal matter. You and your wife will need to cooperate." Every eye in the emergency room shifted to my parents. They tried to hold steady, but their trembling hands betrayed them. I leaned toward Sam. "It's begun. They won't escape this time." Lucas remained unconscious, but with the antidote, his vitals slowly stabilized. The doctor turned to me. "Your information saved his life. Without it, we would have lost critical minutes." I nodded silently. Inside, I felt both relief and bitterness. Lucas was saved, but the truth about my parents was out. This was only the beginning. But at least tonight, the balance had shifted. The one who was meant to be the victim now held the truth and the evidence. While Lucas lay motionless in intensive care, I sat in the stark white hospital corridor. My phone buzzed nonstop. Calls from the police, lawyers, even reporters. News of Lucas's collapse and suspected poisoning at the Sterling family's lavish graduation party had spread through Miami like wildfire. Within 24 hours, the FBI was officially involved. I knew why. It wasn't just the poisoning. It was the trail leading straight to the experimental compounds inside Sterling Biopharma's labs. When the FBI and Miami police stormed Sterling Biopharma headquarters with an emergency search warrant, I wasn't surprised. Box after box of files, hard drives, and records were sealed. It took only days for toxicology experts to confirm the compound in Lucas's blood matched an experimental drug the FDA had suspended due to suspected toxicity. What chilled me was that in every report the company submitted to regulators, there wasn't a single mention of such dangerous side effects. Then came an anonymous email to the FBI from a scientist who worked on the project. They were forced to alter data, hide adverse reactions. He still had the original reports. The FBI traced the lead, uncovering a hidden archive on the company's internal servers, troves of documents showing that top executives, including my parents, had ordered staff to falsify numbers, erase lab animal deaths, and bury liver toxicity warnings. My hands shook as I flipped through the copied files. All my suspicions were no longer theories. They were fact. But that wasn't all. The company's environmental division was exposed. In a warehouse outside the city, investigators uncovered crates of untreated toxic chemicals buried directly in the ground. The shipping records were forged to deceive the EPA. I thought back to the polluted St. Johns River, and fury burned hot in my chest. The video Sam recorded at the party was also submitted to police. It caught the moment my mother discreetly slipped something into the glass before my father handed it to me. The footage wasn't crystal clear, but the movement was unmistakable. Forensic testing confirmed the glass contained traces of the same toxic experimental compound. Sitting in the interrogation room, my voice stayed calm but unyielding. My parents have always seen me as a thorn in their side. I refused to join the company. I refused to enable their corrupt deals. And that night, they didn't just try to ruin my reputation. They tried to end my life. The next day, the Miami Herald ran a bold front-page headline, "Pharmaceutical CEO and wife charged with conspiracy to murder son, fraud, and environmental crimes." Photos of Sterling Biopharma headquarters sealed with FBI tape flooded every news channel. What began as a family tragedy had erupted into a national shockwave about corporate ethics and the moral decay of America's elite. Social media exploded. Thousands called it the cruelest case of parental betrayal in a decade. A new hashtag spread like wildfire, #Justice for Ethan M. Lucas. I read the posts, my hands trembling, my eyes wet. 9 months later, at the federal courthouse in Miami, the trial began. My parents, in dark suits, sat at the defendant's table, their faces cold. Their defense attorney shouted, "My clients are being framed. This was an accident. Ethan fabricated this story to destroy his parents and seize their fortune." I sat there, body rigid. But the prosecution was ready. They presented the video, the toxicology results, the falsified documents, testimony from the company's own employees. A map of environmental contamination lit up the screen, sending murmurs through the courtroom. Lucas, still frail, stepped up to the witness stand. I gripped my hands tightly, watching his trembling figure. "I never imagined my own parents would do this," Lucas said, his voice breaking. "I trusted them. But now I know the truth. They poisoned me, and they meant it for Ethan." My mother tried to speak from the defendant's table. "It was all a misunderstanding. My son is mistaken. We would never harm our own child." But at that moment, the prosecutor revealed the final blow, an email my father had sent to the research division: "Eliminate all adverse reaction data. If not, this project is dead." In the end, the jury delivered its verdict: guilty on all counts. Conspiracy to commit murder, financial fraud, document forgery, gross violations of environmental law. The judge struck his gavel, his voice firm. The defendants are sentenced to long-term federal prison. All personal and corporate assets are hereby frozen. Sterling Biopharma is placed under court supervision, pending dissolution. The courtroom erupted. I closed my eyes as a single tear slipped down my cheek. Not out of pity, but because at last, the truth had come to light. The fallout was immediate and brutal. My father got 15 years federal. My mother got 12. No possibility of parole until they served at least 85%. Sterling Biopharma was seized. Operations shut down. Over 2,000 employees lost their jobs, which I genuinely felt bad about. But the company had been poisoning communities for years. Sometimes the rot goes too deep to save. The financial damage was staggering. Legal fees, fines, civil settlements, their entire fortune was wiped out. The mansion I grew up in was seized, sold for millions to some tech executive. I drove by once. Didn't feel a thing. Beatrice's trust fund was released to me the week after the verdict. $8 million. I moved into the lakeside house she'd left me, nothing fancy, just a wooden cabin with a porch facing Lake Okeechobee. The first night, I sat outside with coffee, watched the sunset. Didn't check my phone once. First time in months I actually felt like I could breathe. Lucas moved in with me after he got out of the hospital. The poisoning had damaged his heart, doctors said he'd need monitoring for a year, but he was alive. Something in him had changed. His first week at the house, he came to me, looking like he hadn't slept. "I'm not finishing my business degree," he said. "I'm applying to law school, environmental law. I want to help people like the ones our company hurt." I didn't say anything, just nodded. That was enough. 3 months later, I used part of my inheritance to set up a foundation, named it after Grandma Beatrice. The fund provides medical assistance to families affected by the contamination, plus scholarships for students studying environmental science and public health. We've helped over 200 families so far. The extended family drama was predictable. Aunts and uncles who'd ignored me for years suddenly wanted to reconnect. Cousins I hadn't heard from since childhood started sending Facebook messages. All with the same energy, concern for my parents, questions about the inheritance, hints about how family should stick together. I blocked every single one of them. 6 months after the sentencing, I got a letter from the federal prison where my mother was held. Handwritten, 3 pages long, full of apologies, explanations, requests for forgiveness. She never meant to hurt me. My father pressured her. She prayed for me. I read it once, then burned it in the fireplace. A week later, another letter arrived. From my father. Different tone entirely. No apologies, just accusations. Said I destroyed the family legacy. Ungrateful for everything they'd given me. Said I would regret this for the rest of my life. I didn't bother reading past the first paragraph. Straight into the fire. The letters kept coming for 2 months. Then they stopped. I assumed they finally got the message. Last month, Lucas got his law school acceptance letter. Full scholarship to the University of Florida at Gainesville. He's starting in the fall. Kid's actually excited about studying for once in his life. Wild, how almost dying can change your priorities. Have you ever had to choose between family and doing what's right, even when it meant burning your own bridges?